What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So after my last video, I was thinking about Yang's performance in the third debate. And I guess my issue with the whole giveaway was that might have been many people's first introduction to universal basic income. And I just don't feel like it was the best representation of the program. So I started thinking, let me do a little bit of research into all of the other people who have talked about it. And I didn't want to go back super far. You know, we've heard Martin Luther King and Milton Friedman and a couple of other names. I wanted to look at more of the recent past. And I was able to find this speech from former President Barack Obama. I wanted to go ahead and let you guys take a look at this clip right here.
Of jobs from north to south, from east to west, while a lot of that was a dominant trend in the late 20th century. The biggest challenge to workers in countries like mine today is technology. And the biggest challenge for your new president, when we think about how we're going to employ more people here, is going to be also technology, because artificial intelligence is here and it is accelerating. And you're going to have driverless cars, and you're going to have more and more automated services. And that's going to make the job of giving everybody work that is meaningful tougher. And we're going to have to be more imaginative. And the pace of change is going to require us to do more fundamental reimagining of our social and political arrangements to protect the economic security and the dignity that comes with a job. It's not just money that a job provides. It provides dignity and structure and a sense of place and a sense of purpose. And so we're going to have to consider new ways of thinking about these problems, like a universal income, review of our work week, how we retrain our young people.
Familiar, right? Like, I feel like I've heard a lot of that somewhere else. I can't think of where.
Why should we be worried about automation?
Well, if you look at the backdrop, we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and those communities have never recovered. Where if you look at the numbers, half of the workers left the workforce and never worked again, and then half of that group filed for disability. Now, what happened to the manufacturing workers is now going to happen to the truck drivers, retail workers, call centers, fast food workers, and on through the economy as we evolve and technology marginalizes the labor of more and more Americans.
So I'm not sure when this actual speech was given or where. It was obviously after Obama was president. Now many people are hearing it for the first time, and it just sounds like this crazy idea. And that's kind of really what this video is about, like this idea that universal basic income is just insane. Just so weird that when we give money to corporations, like that's normal, or when corporations give money to a political figure so that they can get influence or so they can get some policy changed, like that's okay and that's acceptable. But the idea of us receiving money back from the government is just absurd. Like, how dare we? Like, why would that ever happen? I get it, you know, the idea of giving people stuff might make some people, you know, less motivated to work, but we're not talking about giving people $50,000 a year. We're talking about $12,000 a year, which is not enough money to live, not enough money to raise a family on. It's not enough money really to do much besides maybe pay your rent or whatever. I mean, I feel like the last three presidents have all talked about stagnant wages. We all agree that wages haven't gone up, but the idea of giving people money is just crazy. You can't compete with a robot. It's going to be more efficient than you. It never has to be turned off. You can work it as long as you want. Whereas people are going to want health care and a minimum wage and benefits. If I'm running a business, why would I want to do that? Like, of course I want to do whatever I can to avoid paying those additional taxes or paying those additional expenses. Automation is going to allow me to do that. It's just funny to hear a former president even mention that idea when at one point they were in a position to actually do something about it. But then if you've been following the election, you've probably heard other people mention that Hillary Clinton was actually considering running her last election, you know, the one where she lost against Trump, on this idea of universal basic income. Found the passage from her book where she mentions this. Before I ran for president, I read a book called With Liberty and Dividends for All: How to Save Our Middle Class When Jobs Don't Pay Enough by Peter Barnes, which explored the idea of creating a new fund that will use revenue from shared national resources to pay a dividend to every citizen, much like how the Alaska Permanent Fund distributes the state's oil royalties every year. Man, that sounds familiar.
There's one state where everyone in that state now gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, that's right. In Alaska, they call it the oil check, and they love it. And we're going to call this the tech check, and you're going to love it.
Include oil and gas extracted from public lands and the public airwaves used by broadcasters and mobile phone companies. But that gets you only so far. If you view the nation's financial system as a shared resource, then you start raising real money from things like a financial transactions tax. Same with the air we breathe and carbon pricing. Once you've capitalized the fund, you can provide every American with a modest basic income every year. Besides cash in people's pockets, it would also be a way of making every American feel more connected to our country and to one another, part of something bigger than ourselves. I was fascinated by this idea, as was my husband, and we spent weeks working with our policy team to see if it could be viable enough to include in my campaign. We would call it Alaska for America. Unfortunately, we couldn't make the numbers work. To provide a meaningful dividend each year to every citizen, you'd have to raise enormous sums of money. That would either mean a lot of new taxes or cannibalizing other important programs. We decided it was exciting but not realistic. We left it on the shelf. That was the responsible decision. I wonder now whether we should have thrown caution to the wind and embraced Alaska for America as a long-term goal and figured out the details later. We all approach our political positions from our own world, from our own experiences. As a black man in America, I always think there was a time where black people were, 3/5 of a person, or we were property, or there were public lynchings, and just realizing that many Americans just sat by and were cool with it, that was normal. And I think decisions like where we are right now and deciding if this is a good idea, it's gonna be one of those things where, in 100 years, people are gonna look back and be like, I can't believe we waited that long to start a universal basic income, or we waited that long to have universal health care. Why would a society as advanced and as wealthy as the United States at that time not have these policies in place? I've previously said that Yang is trying to get us to Star Trek. I think there is a utopian idea of, a society where we don't have to do a lot of the things that we do, where a lot of these menial tasks don't exist. We're trying to figure out ways to cure all diseases and live longer and live better. Or we can just spend our time doing a lot of things that aren't really that important, that make some companies a lot of money and provide some of us enough money to, get a couple of weeks of vacation and spend the rest of our lives working. Hearing Hillary Clinton ask this question of, maybe she should have just said, let's just go for it. Let's figure out the details later. I feel like a lot of times that's what we don't do. Civil rights legislation came because a group of people decided, you know what? I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I don't care if it doesn't make sense to fight this system, to sit in the front of this bus, or to chain ourselves to these lunch counters. People did things that didn't make sense because they were the right thing to do. Maybe this won't solve all the problems, or maybe there's going to be unintended consequences, but the idea that there's never enough money to give back to people, and there's always enough money to bail a company out, or to give them additional tax breaks and hope that they hire a few more people. Why not try something new? Why not see if maybe there's some validity to this idea? You hear the way Clinton lists this thing out, it sounds very similar to Andrew Yang. She's talking about it's Alaska for America. Yang talks about how technology is the oil for today, and we're going to pay for this with a value-added tax. Clinton talked about how it wouldn't be funded enough. She talked about having to possibly cut some social programs. Yang is willing to cut social programs. Clinton said ultimately it was unrealistic and it was the right decision to leave it out. Obama is saying that maybe it's the solution for the future. And it seems like maybe it's just going to be up to Andrew Yang to actually find out if UBI is the answer. So if you want to find out for yourself if giving everybody $1,000 a month is a good idea, the only way to know is to vote for Andrew Yang. With that said, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Go ahead and put your comments in the comment section below. If you guys like this video, make sure you hit that like, subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next one.